Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share real life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best life. I'm Michelle Scharf.
And I am Jennie Taylor, and we are back for part 2 with our good friend Tiffany Vendela. Tiffany, how are you today?
I'm doing so great. Thank you.
Oh, we are so grateful that you would join us again, because on the first go-round, we realized there was so much more to this story that we couldn't just say, okay, see ya. For our listeners who are tuning in, hopefully they've just barely listened to the first episode and are ready for part 2. Tiffany is the wife of an American soldier who was catastrophically injured. We're going to let her kind of recap the story briefly to what she told us last time. And in the last episode, we did kind of look at what happened and the beginning of that relationship, the injury. In this episode today, we're excited to see now what? Kind of the then what. I mean, this was 13 years ago. You're still with him. You have a beautiful life with him. You have a family with him. So obviously you've come quite a journey from that initial injury and a definite quite a journey from your initial meeting when you guys were young and still just dating. So Tiffany, thank you again for joining us twice, and bring us up to speed and tell us kind of a little recap of what you've already told us, and then, oh my goodness, what happened next?
Well, thank you for having me again. So the last time I kind of talked about how we fell in love, how I was pretty naive about life, and also kind of unknown of what the future was going to hold. So I'm going to take you to when we were at Brooke Army Medical Center. He was able to get out of the hospital, and we were just trying to figure out how to do life. Well, a few months into his recovery, his mother started to see double vision. She ended up going to the doctor, and it turned out that she had a brain tumor.
Oh, no.
So she had surgery. Thankfully, it was benign, but she had a stroke following the surgery. And I was still in North Dakota at the time. So they didn't really know how bad it was going to be, but Trey felt like he needed to be there. We figured out how I could get to Texas, where he was, and then we both were going to get on a plane and go to Phoenix. Well, traveling, I think, is in general sometimes a pain, but I didn't realize the struggles that we were going to have in a wheelchair, because we had not really gone out into environment or even the social atmosphere where you had those challenges of getting on the airplane. You know, he has to get strapped to this chair, and then what do you do if you have to go to the bathroom? He didn't really want to go to the bathroom because it was they have to get the aisle chair, and then they've got to parade you down the aisle. And so that was, I think, a big learning curve. And unfortunately, there were lots of times where, well, twice particularly, I'm thankful he still married me, where I dumped him out of his wheelchair because there was places where they didn't have ramps or they didn't have accessibility. So that was a big challenge, even going to hotel rooms. A lot of places you cannot get into the bathroom and shut the door, even if it's handicap accessible. So those challenges were a struggle, and he was worried about his mom. So not only were we trying to navigate life, he still was doing rehab. He still didn't have a lot of strength, but he was worried about his mom. He wanted to be there to motivate him. So in a way, I think it was a blessing that he could go and encourage his mother and get the focus off of him. And she's doing well. She had to do rehab for a few months, but she's at home and doing well. So we fast forward maybe a month, and the house that he had owned in Texas actually ended up flooding. So there was just one trial after the other. So we had to go figure out what to do with that. Insurance, we were trying to sell it because we knew we weren't going to stay in Texas. I was getting close to graduating physical therapy school, and I was down in Texas, which was a blessing. So we had to try to figure out insurance, getting the house ready to sell, and just overall rehab with the pain. My goodness, the pain that he experienced through this whole thing was really heartbreaking. And I'm a number 2 on the Enneagram. I don't know if I told you that in the last one, but I want to help people. I'm a helper and I want to fix it. So a lot of him being in pain and struggling to even transfer from his wheelchair to the bed or the toilet, it just was really emotionally draining on me, as well as trying to finish out my schooling. So during those times, emotionally, I think he had pushed me away. He'd try to be very mean to me. I don't know if I had mentioned any of that in the previous.
Yeah, you did. That it was almost as if he was trying to give you an out to leave the relationship.
Yeah, and
because
so we struggled
he felt
with
badly.
that up and down a little bit. But eventually, I think he realized that I'm stubborn enough and loved him enough that I was going to stay no matter
that he's not getting off that easy, huh?
That's right. I'm like, sorry, you're stuck. The only
You're
reason
stuck
I'm
with
gonna
me,
marry
honey.
you is 'cause you can't run away. Sorry.
Oh, you're so cute.
But anyway, so we went through that. But during that time, there was also a lot of blessings. There was an article in the AP and about us. And the Montel Williams show actually got a hold of that AP article and invited us to come on the show. And so that's kind of a funny story, because when they called me, I was thinking of Jerry Springer, like initially in my mind. And so I was like,
well, this is not for us.
Why is his ex-wife going to come back? Like, what? Yeah. Why are we going?
Where
they wouldn't
are we going?
tell me.
Yeah.
They're like, no, it's good. So anyways, after I got through that initial confusion, they brought us out on Christmas. And so there was another experience of travel. So that was the second time on an airplane. We prepared a little bit better that time. And, learning curve. That's, I think a lot of it is just being willing to learn new things and
I remember
not be embarrassed of things that are a little bit different, right?
Yeah, one of the first times I met you and one of the first times I heard your husband speak, he used the phrase "a walking man's world," and he kind of was telling the rest of us that have 2 working legs that this is a walking man's world. And as you're explaining this, my goodness, an airplane is for sure designed for walking people. I've been on a plane with a stroller before and an infant, and I'm trying to navigate the stroller and the car seat and the baby. But at some point I could carry that baby because that baby weighed 15 pounds or something. Totally different if you're the adult in the wheelchair, in the aisle, little things like using the restroom. You make such a good point. Most of us don't even think about those everyday moments, shutting the bathroom door behind you when you're in there, that, oh my gosh, I take that for granted as a walking woman in a walking man's world.
Yeah. I traveled with my husband. Yeah. I traveled with my husband when he was sick and we had to use a wheelchair. And he also had issues with the medication making him need to use the restroom a lot. And so we were stuck on the runway, I remember at one point. And, they said for everyone to remain in their seats, but he had to go to the bathroom. And when he had to go, he had to go. And so, yeah, I can relate to the story. It can be challenging, Yeah, I finally encouraged him to get up and use the restroom. He did. But,
But, yeah, you kind of want to blend in. You don't want, like you said, the attention of everybody watching, noticing that you are not a walking man in a walking man's world.
And John had the ability to actually get up, even though he had to be wheelchaired in and wheelchaired out and didn't have the energy he was able to get up and walk.
At least enough.
Yeah. So, it's a whole different scenario when you don't have the ability to actually walk yourself down the aisle to get to the restroom. But I mean, all of those things are challenging, even small differences, but not having legs, that's a whole new level.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's another part of our journey as well, is initially, I think it bothered both of us that people would just stare. And our initial thing was like, oh my gosh, it made us feel uncomfortable. But then, I had to come to, it looks different. It's something that's different. And I think it's human nature. If you see something different, you just want to see it. Right.
Right. Yep.
And so I think we have gotten over that, because obviously it's been many years. And I think we understand that people are just curious, and sometimes they want to come talk to him and just don't know what to say. And so our perspective on that has changed significantly. But initially in the beginning, it was very uncomfortable for both of us just because
I can only imagine. It's
I'm
hard
a protector, enough. And so I don't, if someone's looking at my man like that, I initially have that response of like, what are you doing? You know, I wanted to protect him, but I also have learned it's not malicious and it's not intentional. It's just, it is. And if anybody comes along that, you know, experience of wondering, like the best thing to do is just treat them normally and ask them. You know, Trey's just like, just ask me and I will talk to you about it, but just don't sit and stare. Like that's one thing.
So really the better way would just to be say, hey, do you mind if I ask what happened? Or, I mean, how would a person like me, without knowing you and your husband, how would I maybe say that in a way that I'm not gawking and staring, but clearly I'm curious, because in my mind, the default is that a grown man has 2 arms and 2 legs and this man doesn't. I don't want to come across as a total jerk, but I might be curious, which, like you said, is leading to my staring without my thinking I'm staring. And then what an opportunity for me to hear a little of your husband's story. Is there a comfortable way that someone like me could ask your family that type of question without being a total idiot? Or do you just expect people to be total idiots anyway?
I can only speak to him because there may be some people who may be offended and I can't speak to them. But for Trey, you know, starting off with, you know, thank you for your service. Obviously, he doesn't like that just because
no American service member does.
Yeah, he's like, no, it's okay. Like, but opening like that. But may I ask what happened? And he's more than willing to talk about it. I think it's very therapeutic for him. Okay. So just asking, may I ask what happened? And he'd be more than happy to tell you. So I think that's a lot of a struggle. I had a friend tell me once, because I would say, yeah, my husband got blown up in Iraq. And she said, you know, maybe you shouldn't put it that way because it makes people feel uncomfortable. And I said, well, why
Trey's
would I
kind of uncomfortable.
You feel more comfortable when that's what happened? You know, like
Tiffany,
so you can't make everybody happy.
No,
but,
right? And how great would it be if we as a culture could just be a little more honest with each other, rather than, you know, we look, we stare, we gawk, we wonder. Similar thing happens sometimes with my kids, my littler kids. Maybe they're at school, maybe they're on a field trip, maybe with friends, and they'll say something like, the bad guys killed my dad, or my dad is dead. And sometimes the adults in the room get very uncomfortable with that, because here's this little child talking about her dad being dead. And they look at me like, what will you do about that? And I say, her dad is dead. Like, what do you want me to do about that? And I've gotten more comfortable being more direct, Tiffany, with what's happened with my husband and our family, and realizing, like you, we beat around the bush and we pretend the giant elephant in the room isn't there, when it's like, dude, everybody sees the elephant. Just say hi, and let's maybe, you know,
I've had that
talk
same experience, even with my adult children, when I've said, oh, well, my husband's dead. And I said it so factly without a lot of emotion. And my daughter was like, Mom, you can't say that to people. They don't know what to do with that. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that either. It's just the way it is, you know?
Right. So back to Trey, Tiffany, he did get blown up in Iraq. And if that makes us as Americans uncomfortable to hear that, I almost think that's maybe better for us.
I think it is too.
To be uncomfortable, and then maybe we can try to be more sympathetic, and then really be grateful for his service, not just cliche, thank you for your service. But maybe if we knew a little more of the story behind that service, that gratitude would be more heartfelt. And I know it definitely is for me to think, oh my goodness, you lost not just a physical portion of your body, but you lost your way of life for me,
right?
For my freedom, for my ability to stare and gawk awkwardly at people in the airport. Like, unbelievable how it brings it home. So I appreciate you, Tiffany, being direct with us and telling us that, and being willing to share this story.
We just don't hear enough of these stories, really. I mean, there's so many servicemen and women that come back with some invisible scars, and we don't hear those stories either. I want to hear more of this story. Where are you in so what's going on now?
We went to the Montel Williams show. Montel Williams was in, I believe, the Navy, but he was doing his last show, and it was just beautiful. It was a Christmas special. He gave this family that came back from Iraq, I think he was blind, a van. They brought a soldier home to a gal who just had a baby. It was beautiful. And then with us, he gave us a wedding and a honeymoon. So that was really exciting.
Right, because you're not even married yet. You're still engaged.
I think I saw this episode.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I'm sitting here going,
it was pretty incredible.
Oh my gosh.
So at that point on, we had a lot of planning to do. They set us up with a gal that is out of Loveland, Colorado. So I got to pick out flowers and all of these things that we would have never, ever been able to afford.
Sure.
So that really was a blessing. I graduated physical therapy school, and Trey had been working really, really hard.
So is this 2008 now? Remind me so we can all go Google that
so
episode.
This is now fast forwarding to, or rewinding to 2008. Yes.
Okay. So this is December
May
of 2008.
We were, trying to figure out life between when we got the wedding announcement to when we're about to get married. Well, the 2 weeks before we were going to get married, I graduated with my doctorate of physical therapy at the University of North Dakota.
Awesome.
And the best part of that, and I think it wasn't even me graduating, it was the fact that Trey was able to be there. And he walked up with me on our hooding ceremony on his prosthetics.
No way.
Which was incredible. So he hooded me. And I think that's one of the most amazing and best times that I could picture after he was wounded, because I was
Will
so
you
proud
send
of
us
him.
a picture of that day? I want to see that. I think America needs to see that. If you're okay sharing a photo of that with us, I just think that sounds
I'll have to
powerful.
Find it,
it's okay. You got time.
So that was incredible. My school was like, it was just, I think, very touching for everybody there, and so that was a real big highlight.
Well, plus you had mentioned in our last episode that your school had almost become like your family. Some of your colleagues there and your professors there and your
there was tears. It was just wonderful.
It was like a victory for everyone.
Just a victory for all of us, because he really is a good supporter of me, and so he wanted me to finish. And I did. And
this
so
is
that
so
was
awesome.
incredible.
So awesome. We're going to take a quick break, and then we want to come back and we want to hear about the wedding, the Montel Williams wedding, and then we want to hear about the family that you now have and the journey that you begin as Mr. and Mrs. After that great wedding that you received from Montel Williams. How great of him to do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you had that opportunity to not only have the financial help with the wedding, but it's almost a distraction away from all of the terrible, awful things you've been through, and said, hey, we're going to give you kind of a happy, celebratory opportunity that doesn't necessarily make up for everything difficult you've been to, but at least is something that you can kind of say, wow, here's maybe a break from all the bad news we've had for the past several months. So we'll be right back, and we can't wait to hear about the wedding. Okay, and we're back. Tiffany, we're excited to hear you've graduated. You've gotten your doctorate in physical therapy. Your husband was able to join you on the stage, hood you. I just can't picture the emotion of that day. It sounds so beautiful, so powerful for all in attendance and everyone that was on that journey with you. Then we transition into the wedding. Can you walk us through what happens next, and you begin your life legally as husband and wife, and then the journey ahead?
It was really an amazing day. I could have never pictured it any more perfect, other than obviously him having legs and not having that. But the day was amazing. I came in on a horse and carriage.
Oh my gosh.
Trey was on his legs. We had the military there supporting us with the swords, and it really was a fairy tale wedding. So Trey his gift is giving. And he had given me a wedding ring, an engagement ring, which was beautiful. But we had gone to the store, and I thought, oh my gosh, I saw Caroline. It's my ring. And I thought, oh, wow, that's beautiful. And he goes, well, do you want it? I'm like, no, I have this ring. It's very special. But on the wedding day, we were saying our vows, which is incredibly beautiful. And I went into our marriage with, I think I was a little naive of what life could bring, but I was hopeful. I knew at some point in our lives this would be normal. And so I was really excited. but we were saying our vows. And when he was there to give me my ring, he pulled out Caroline. And of course I like bawled, but that's his way of showing he loved me and thankful that I stayed. And then we had a great party afterwards. So he was in his prosthetics for probably 12 hours. And at that point, he had not been in them longer than maybe an hour.
Oh my gosh.
So we had the wedding. It was the dinner. It was amazing that night. You know, I had saved myself for marriage, and we were able to consummate the marriage, which was really special for me. It was my gift to him. I wanted to save that for whoever I was married. So that was very special. But the next day, life kicked us in the gut. Because of him being in his prosthetics for a very long time. Like we eventually get to the point where this became a normal, but he got these horrible zapping pains in his legs. Like he explains it as someone putting an electrical bolt on your legs. It's like nerve pain, so it's very, very painful. And he would scream and he'd be writhing in pain. And this was something new that we hadn't experienced. So we ended up taking him to the hospital. And when I was just really worried and thinking, oh my gosh, what is it? Well, he had to get more pain medications and drugs, and then he would be snowed. And this would happen probably every 3 to 4 months. And so I think part of, as our relationship went on and we we built a house, his pain was very significant. The VA kept giving him narcotics, and then he would get this pain and I would get all emotional and I want to help and I'd just be in such distress. I think for my own self-preservation, instead of being concerned and worried, I'd go immediately to being mad. And we had to really work on this because he'd be like, why are you mad at me? You know, when he's thriving around in pain. And I couldn't necessarily tell him why because I didn't know. But as I did some self-reevaluation, I told him, I said, it's because I can't handle seeing you in pain. It hurts too bad. It's not right, but it's definitely how I protected myself, and I have learned to deal with that. But a lot of time I would go to anger because that's the only way that I could function without being totally a basket case.
Yeah, I totally hear you.
And as time went on, we had our son Quentin in 2010, and he was definitely a blessing because they told Trey that he probably wouldn't be able to have kids just because of the overpressure of the pelvis. They said, you may not be able to have children. And so he was a blessing, Quentin. And from the very beginning, and I just have to thank God for this, he knows what he's doing. Quentin has been a very old soul. And as he was growing, there got to a point where we were in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We chose to move because Trey brought me out here to Utah, and I thought it was incredibly beautiful. And there were some other things that were happening in Cheyenne that we didn't love it. We were ready to move on. So we moved out and we found a house here with the job that I have now. And it was great, but his pain was still considerably horrible. And the way that the VA fixed that was just giving him more narcotics. And then the more narcotics he had, the less of that person that I knew was leaving. And I think through this time, he was not the person that I said yes to. He was in bed probably 10 hours of the day. And looking back, so I worked full time at this point, and Quentin was, maybe 1. I truly believe that God was looking over Quentin because Trey was not present. And I look back and I think, how could I have left him with him? And he even says, I can't believe I watched Quentin like that but we thought, well, this is the way it is. This is the way life is. He can function. But Quentin, he was pretty much taking care of himself.
So he was on all these narcotics that they were actually impacting his
His personality.
His focus, his ability.
It was his personality. It was his ability to do anything, really, like the motivation
large
to get
doses.
up. You know,
I hate to bring this up,
just,
but they also cause like constipation and other problems.
They do.
Narcotics is such a rolling ball of mess once you start on them.
You know, and it is. And so I remember he was on fentanyl patches.
Oh, my goodness.
They were not enough. So some nights I would wake up and he was sucking on them. And I'm going, you can't do that. Like, that's going to kill you if you do that. But he didn't have the thought process, or even, he just didn't know what he was doing, you know, and he was just so desperate to get relief. Like, he would do anything. So at this point, so Quentin was probably 2 maybe, and I wanted another baby. And with narcotics, not only does it decrease your drive to do anything, your personality, but it also decreases sex drive. So at this point, I wanted a baby, and I'd have to beg him, you know, to have that relationship with me. And I thought I had to deal with a lot of like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Is he cheating on me? Is there someone else? Am I not good enough? Because your husband should want to do that. You know, you hear from other women like, oh, my husband can't, like, he won't leave me alone. That's all he wants. And so I had to kind of internally be okay with what was there. Eventually, 15 months later, we got pregnant with Trayden. And it was such a blessing. I was super excited. We had him. And I remember after we had him, Trey, I go, oh my gosh, isn't this so great? And Trey looked at me and he goes, the only thing that I see in my future is pain. So at a time when you have a baby and you think, oh my gosh, like the world is wonderful.
The hope of the future.
He was really dreading the future. Like, he didn't want to live. And there was a lot of times that I would come home and I would just pray that he was still alive. You know, I didn't know if he would kill himself, or, you know, I had a lot of fears because, and honestly, I probably would not blame him, because watching somebody you love be in constant pain, it's hard. Like, it's a hard thing. So I wouldn't have blamed him, but it was really one of my biggest fears is losing him, because I felt like I almost lost him once.
Right.
I don't want to lose him again. And I have had to deal with a lot of those feelings, and I have, which is awesome. But anyways, so moving forward, we had a real blessing in our life. Dr. Erickson, who lived in our neighborhood. Trey had been on Lyrica, which is a nerve drug in the Army, but when he got into the VA system, they weren't willing to pay for it. So gabapentin was a generic, and it didn't work. So we ended up getting with Dr. Erickson, and he's a lot of mental health as well. So he deals with chronic pain, mental health, and he wrote a prescription for Lyrica. It was about $8 a month, but we were willing to do it because if it helped with pain, and it did. Trey ended up getting pancreatitis, idiopathic pancreatitis, and he had tried, he was desperate. So he was desperate to get relief from pain, and he had tried some marijuana drops at night because that's the only way that he could sleep. He wouldn't do it during the day, but it gave him some relief in the evening. And he had talked to the doctors about it. And they're like, well, I mean, we can't stop you, but there's nothing else we can do. So he was in the hospital, and I got a phone call because his was off. And he said, well, your husband tested positive for marijuana. And I said, well, he told you that was going to happen. And he goes, well, it's federally illegal, and we will not give him any more drugs if he tests positive in 2 weeks. And I thought, okay, so you weren't willing to help him, and he tried something that worked to help at least let him sleep. I was just really frustrated and angry. And so once he got out of the hospital, he was too. So he went down So he had started taking Lyrica and it had been helping after this whole event. And he went down to the VA and he says, he lines out all of these narcotics, all of these other medications he's taking because of the side effects of narcotics, and said, you tell me how much you're paying a month for these medications. And it was $1,200 a month. Wow. For all of these narcotics and drugs that were not working. And so he goes, all right, so here's a $300 bottle of Lyrica or whatever it is. You won't give me this, but you'll pay $1,200 a month for things that don't work.
And that are messing with his mind and his body and his personality and his mental wellness.
Mm-hmm. And so they were like, okay, well, we'll give it to you. 7 years. It took 7 years to get a drug that actually helped.
That's amazing. So what year is this?
So this was 2000 and, let's see, 2006, 14. Sorry, I'm trying to think of which babies. So 2014. Yeah. So 7 years after his initial injury, finally the VA would give him a drug that actually helped because it was not a generic drug.
Wow. So crazy. We've got to take a break.
Go ahead.
We've got to take a break, but we want to hear the rest of the story. It's amazing the struggles that we go through. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and we'll pick up. And we're back with Tiffany Vendela. We have been listening to a struggle, those first early years trying to figure out pain medication, pain control. You know, I can relate to the fighting with the doctors and trying to get the medications or the treatment and care that you need and not being able to get it approved either by healthcare. You have an additional layer to that where you're dealing with the veterans medical system. That I'm sure adds a layer I don't even understand. But tell us, you finally get this prescription prescribed. What starts changing? Is that Lyrica able to help him lower the amount of narcotics he's on?
Yes. So I am really proud of Trey. And one thing that's always amazed me about Trey is he's very mentally tough. He's very driven. Once he gets something on his mind, he's going to do it. So we got the Lyrica. It was helping. So now it's time to get off of the narcotics. So instead of doing it the proper way, which is,
carefully and slowly,
slowly weaning, he just took what he had and then he's like, I'm just going to stop. Well, that was a really bad idea because he stopped. And when you're on narcotics, your body really does want to feel pain, and that narcotic decreases those receptors. So your body creates more receptors so that they can feel pain. Well, when you don't have those narcotics on board, any type of sensation is painful. So when he had ran out, I just remember seeing him on the bed, like he was thrashing around, screaming, and I was like, what do I do? So I called Dr. Erickson and I said, he's having like a terrible, terrible time. Like he can't sit still. Like he's tortured, like literally tortured. So he had given him some medication for some anxiety and to help him sleep. Well, he took some, and that night I was sleeping and woke up to him kind of rolling around, and he stopped in the hallway for a long time. And I got up and I said, what are you doing? And he said, I can't get back to the room. I don't know where it's at. I'm like, oh gosh. Okay. So I'm like, he took too much medicine. In the middle of the night, counted how many he could have for the next day because I was still working. I had called a nanny, and thank God for people who were super kind to come over and watch the kids because I knew that he wouldn't be able to. At this time we had Traden in Quentin. And I went to work the next day. I get a call from him the next day, and he is mad, like mad. You didn't leave me enough medication. Like, what are you doing? And I thought, oh gosh, it was nighttime. Maybe I didn't count. So like an idiot, I told him where it was. And I got home that night after work, and I could wake him up, but that's about it. He couldn't have a conversation with me. I didn't know what he was saying. And so obviously I counted how many he had, and he had maybe 18 Ativan and 6 Seroquel in a 24 period of time.
Oh.
So I was really worried. So I called the doctor right away, and he goes, "Is there any narcotics?" And I said, "No, we do not have any narcotics." And which is thankful, because, you know, when people say they have an accidental overdose, before I didn't understand. I didn't understand how you accidentally overdose, but at this point I do. He was in such pain and in such confusion, he would have taken anything he had. So thank God we didn't have any narcotics, because that would have killed him. But anyway, so that was about 6 weeks of just, it was hard. Like, that was one of the hardest times, I think, in our marriage, just because I worried so much about him, and he was still hurting from not only his pain, but the narcotics and getting off of the withdrawals. And anyways, fast forward, he gets off it, and it was awesome. Like, the tray that I said yes to was coming back. You know, we had to go through this transition. I was doing life so long without him. When he was more present, was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, can you give me some space?
Right.
So I had to transition to, like, him not being present to present, and learning how, you know, really to incorporate him into my life, because I had become such a independent mom, and we would just do things without him, and now contributing him to our life, which was great. And then obviously, you know, when before with babies, I was like, my gosh, like I saved myself for this, like I saved it for this. But then the narcotics came off, and all the drives came back, and lo and behold, 9 months later, after Trayden was born, we got pregnant with Caden, our third baby. So he's a surprise, and we're thankful for that. So I kind of told you in the beginning, when I was at, when 9/11 happened, you know, I didn't have any necessary ties with directly, and how much that day would affect my life, not only with Trey going to war and being significantly wounded and changing the trajectory of our life with challenges, struggles, but it also brought so many blessings too. We were contacted by the Stephen Stiller Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and they have blessed us so much with a home where Trey can now be pretty much self and independent with everything he wants to do. Like, he can go into the bathroom and have privacy. He can get in and out of the house and all exits, not just one.
Tiffany, tell us a little about that house. I know, because I've been there. I was there with you the day that home was dedicated, but this is a smart home. So this isn't just a house that maybe was kind of throw a couple ramps in so his wheelchair works. Tell us a little about kind of the architectural, the design, the setup of why this house works so well for Trey and for your family.
So it's all on one level. We have doors that you can push a button and will open for him. The bathroom, you have an intercom system where you can talk to people. We've got 360-degree cameras of the home, which really helps you feel more secure. A lot of times when guys go to war, that's something that is really important to them, being safe.
Oh, absolutely.
And feeling safe. So that camera system has been super helpful. But Trey is the cook of the family, and so he is the king of the kitchen. I have zero responsibility in there, which is nice, and I'm sure my kids and husband like that too. But there's the cooktop that lowers to his level, so he doesn't have the neck and the shoulder pain that he had prior in the other homes. There's parts of the counters that are lower that he can prepare on. And so it's just awesome. You know, the bathrooms, getting in and out of the tub, the hallways are bigger. It just really allows him to be independent with at least moving around.
It's a home where he fits, even though he still has to live in a walking man's world. He can at least feel comfortable at home. I love that so much. It's like, I just love it so much.
That's awesome.
And that's very recent, right? That's within this year. That's
Yep, July.
That's one
July
good thing from 2020, so, I guess.
2020. You know, people say that 2020 is just, I mean, yes, there's been some really hard times in 2020, but 2020 has brought so many blessings to us. We've been introduced to so many kind people. I mean, the home's a blessing. I think anytime, this is one thing that I've learned, I think, through the challenges of our life. One, it's just a season, right?
Right.
We will get through this, and you have to just stay positive and be thankful for the things that you have. You know, even it snows outside and I've got to go shovel. Do you know what? I'm just out there praising God. I have a body that can do that. You know, like I try to see the things, the good in everything, even if it's bad. And so having that I guess it's optimistic that things will get better, and just being thankful for my boys, and a husband who's a great dad and a really good husband. And I'm super lucky that I have a hero all to myself.
Oh, I love that.
This is like such a perfect wrap up to this. Like, you should come host the show, Tiffany, because we always like to kind of end on but what's the resilience? And you, in that one paragraph, just listed like 26 features of resilience all in one by Tiffany Vendela. You should write a book. But I mean, the things you said, I was taking notes. It's just a season that whatever this is we're going through, it will pass in one way or another. Now, sometimes it passes with the death of a person or the end of a chapter, and yet there is still more beyond that. You said to stay positive, and you specifically said to see the good even if it's bad. Yeah. Like, that's a double vision of its own, to see the good even in the bad. And what a powerful energy that will give you in your life to be able to say, instead of, oh, it's snowing, I've got a shovel. How many of us woke up when it snows and say, well, at least I have 2 legs and 2 arms, so I can go shovel? We don't think like that. We moan and we complain, and yet the resilience is in seeing the good, being grateful, being positive, acknowledging the pain. I mean, you've shared with us some really real and raw moments, and I appreciate that, because that can't be easy to do. And yet I think we need to hear it, particularly where your husband's pain and your family struggles are because of the freedom that the rest of us get to enjoy.
Before we wrap up, though, I want to know, how's his pain today?
You know, he has done so much better on Lyrica. However, it still is a constant struggle for him. You know, I had mentioned he had been walking on prosthesis. He cannot do that really very much now, just because of the pain that he's experiencing. You know, he had multiple injuries to every part of his body. And so if he does anything extra, it's painful. So he still manages with pain. Sometimes he has some good days, and a lot of times there's just days where he just doesn't feel well. But he's always positive, and he's just the most patient person. I would be a bear if I went through what he goes through. So I'm thankful for that. I'm hoping someday maybe it'll get better, but at least he's to a point where he's him. And he really just goes through life even when it's hard. And I think that's a motivation for me, because there's some days, you know, we feel bad or we don't feel good, but my gosh, if he can do it, so can I.
It's beautiful. I really want to meet Trey.
And you've got to meet the darling little boys. Yeah. They are, I'm telling you, they are the cutest, sweetest things.
I'm so jealous, Jenny. You get to do the coolest things ever.
I'm with you, Tiffany, in saying that even though 2020 has brought a lot of hardship for a lot of people, it's been so full of blessings and opportunities that I will always look back on and say, wow, what a year on both ends. But one of those great blessings was meeting you and your sweet boys.
I don't know if you can look back, and I'm sure anybody who has gone through like a tragedy or a loss, or you can see how things always work for good. You know, there's blessings that come out of bad. And so I think I don't know if you guys feel the same way. But
I think that people that choose to see it. And I think that we've all met some people in our life that have had some really hard struggles, and they stay in that struggle. They don't choose to see or make something good. And I think that it's a very individual thing, right? Like, I can't say, but this good thing came out of this for you or whatever. That person has to dig deep sometimes to find the blessing in spite of the tragedy. And I personally always feel like, okay, that's my go-to question for myself when something hard hits. but what's something good that will come out of this?
Yeah.
You know,
You're
it's
right.
it's a go-to mental tactic, if you will, that I have. But I don't think that everybody actually does feel that way, that goes through trauma.
But I think that is a tool of resilience, or maybe it, you know, you say, I choose to see the good. We could probably dissect that word choose, the effort that goes into that choice,
Right.
the repetitive nature of I've got to choose and choose. And it's not just, I chose to be positive and my problems went away. But I agree with you, Tiffany, 100%. I even wrote it down what you said, that there's good that comes from these things. There's blessings that come out of the bad. And, you know, I've said this several times before. A lot of people want to say, all things happen for a reason. And I choose to say, I think we can find or make reason out of all things that happen. And for me, God helps me do that. People like you help me do that too. Mm-hmm. But I think it's an active exercise. That's why
it's a decision. It's a choice.
It's a muscle. It's a muscle to exercise.
Yeah. It's a conscious choice we make.
Tiffany, you're fantastic. We love you. We love your family. We're so grateful that your husband is alive and at least in somewhat, management of his pain. And just thank you on behalf of all of us who enjoy the freedom that your husband protected that day and for so many years. Please know I'm not just saying thank you for your service because it's a tagline, but I genuinely mean it. And I know many, many other people who feel the exact same way. We will never be able to thank you fully for not just Trey's service, but for your family's service and sacrifice. So please accept that with just the most sincerity I can muster, and just God bless you and that sweet family of yours. I can't wait to see you again. And hopefully when COVID calms down, we can have a fun barbecue and let the kids run around and be crazy together.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for wanting to hear our story, and hopefully it touches somebody.
Well, I think it will. And thank you. Thank your whole family, just like Jenny said, for your service. And I'm kind of exhausted it's just such a huge story to hear, but so also uplifted to realize there's so many families out there, and especially your family specifically, that have gone through a lot in order for us to maintain our freedoms, to maintain the ability to say, well, I don't want to wear a mask.
Or I don't want to shovel the snow.
But that's a whole nother story. But I really appreciate it, and it's not just a tagline. I really do appreciate the service that Trey gave, and in turn you decided to share with him, and it's a beautiful story of love. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, we thank you for tuning again. If anybody knows like a great author, I'm positive, or a ghostwriter, you could get with Tiffany and Trey. This would make such a fantastic book. I'm just putting that out there. I don't work for anybody. I'm not plugging anybody, but man, I want to read the whole story. So grateful for what you shared. For our listeners, we hope that you liked this episode as well, and that you'll subscribe to our podcast, that you'll leave us a rating and a review, share it with your friends and your family. And as always, if you or someone you know has a real life story of real things you've had to face and overcome in these challenges, please contact us. We'd love to hear your story and share it with our listeners. You can find us on Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient, or on email at rrpodcast@ksl.com. And remember, no matter what you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles people might be going through. Take care, everybody. Till next time.